Mankind understands two kinds of rights. Both kinds entitle human beings to special treatment and consideration. First of all, there are a set of gifts that attach to the person, usually at birth. Some of us would prefer if these rights were recognized sooner. Some might want human rights to be given later, but regardless, human rights are the right of all human beings. Then there are a similar set of rights called natural rights. Natural rights and human rights are often considered synonymous and are often identical in many respects. Natural rights are the property of all persons, but these rights are sometimes extended to other life forms and to the earth itself. Environmentalists tend to be supporters of natural rights more than they are of human rights. The basic weakness of rights theory is the dubious origin of rights. There appears to be only two possible origins for anything: one is God and the other is humanity. We may say natural rights come from nature, but it is people who articulate them. However, even though some might say we articulate the rights that are said to come from God, in fact God puts more obligations on us than rights. We are told to love one another and to do unto others as we would have done unto us. But there is nothing in the Bible that would suggest we are born with specific and inalienable guarantees. Indeed, it is one of the pet peeves of secularists that God does not seem to acknowledge our human rights. Yet, trying to embed human rights in nature is a bizarre exercise in futility. There are no rights in nature. But worse, even were there a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, who or what is responsible for providing these rights? Nature does not give anyone a right to life or liberty. The expectation is that if we cannot defend our life, we will become the next meal of a predator. Reality has always posed a problem for the left. It is one thing to claim a right, it is difficult to find the resources needed to provide an entitlement. The more the left gives, the less there is to share. Socialism is self-limited, as the state, no matter how big or absolute, can only share what exists. Once shared, it is gone. The left may claim we each have a right to life. But reality is such that even the strongest dictatorship can only offer some level of medical care, if the person is unwell, or a degree of justice, if a crime has been committed. No socialist can guarantee the person will be kept alive, and certainly not alive in a condition we want to live in. Any theory of rights needs to overcome the question of origins and assignment. Why bother to assure us we have rights no one can expect to benefit from? This being said, it seems obvious that rights either come from God or have little credibility. Nature cannot be a source of inalienable rights. The state can promise rights, but it can only provide them by taking from one group to benefit the recipient of its purported rights. When it comes to rights, there are not a lot of options. Rights can only come from sources that make no guarantees. Neither God nor nature make unqualified promises. We do not get a free pass because we are human. God does not owe us anything, and so why would He give us unrestricted rights? We do not have a right to live, nor do we have a right to be saved. God says that he who will not work, neither shall he eat, so He does not even guarantee us a meal. He tells us to be charitable and condemns murder and other crimes, but this is not the same as granting us rights to never be imposed on. We are not guaranteed a life free of toil or trouble. The existence of evil is not a problem for a people who know they live in an evil world. A problem atheists have with God is that He is not open to quid pro quo proposals. God does not make deals based on our values and priorities. We obey Him and follow His commands or suffer the consequence. Nature is no better because ultimately nature manifests the presence of God. Atheists display pictures of suffering kids as a demonstration God does not exist or is not a God of love, but these pictures indicate that nature and man also do not eliminate human suffering. If there are hungry children and you know there is no God, or that He will not feed them, why are you not feeding them? The point of human rights seems to be the idea that certain things are inalienable or even constituent features of all persons. We are each entitled to a basket of social goods as a welcome gift to all members of the human race. But is there any reason for thinking being human is sufficient to give one merit? Is being human a good thing in itself akin to being gay? The right to life is not an analytical or abstract concept. It is not even akin to reaching 21 and being considered an adult. Life can be lost, damaged, or destroyed. To have a right to life means there is a burden on all of us that your existence creates. Life by its very nature demands resources be dedicated to its maintenance. The right to life is carte blanche to all the things needed to maintain life. We are familiar with the resources that can be marshaled to save one life, whether it be endangered by foreign nations or natural events. No one claims we all have a right to an income of $30,000 per annum, but if the cost of our human rights add up to this amount, where does the resources come from? If we have a right to a free education, free medical care, a pension, rescue if endangered, in food, shelter, and clothes, how much must be allocated to each of us to keep everyone supplied with the things we have a right to? The real economic cost is the dark side of human rights. Your right to your free house is a penalty and obligation on the economy. Despite the claim that if an action or program will save even one life, it will be worth it, it rarely is. No life has infinite worth because no life can be given infinite worth without it impacting the lives of many others. The actions of murderers are due to the inordinate value they place on their own needs and life. If killing a potential witness will save their life, then it is worth it to a murderer. They have, for all intents and purposes, their own theory of human rights, which makes their own life of supreme worth. Criminals do not need to look at the cost of what they do because they work to ensure the cost is borne by society and future generations. The rest of us have to look at costs. We have no choice. Someone ends up paying the costs not paid by freeloaders. No army commits its entire force to the success of one battle. No unit will risk the lives of its men to save one. Even if the calculations are subjective, potential losses compared to potential benefit has to be made. During an engagement, no soldier has unlimited rights to rescue. His rights or expectations have to be balanced against the impact a rescue attempt will have on the men undergoing the rescue and the prosecution of the war. An officer with crucial information will generate a larger and more determined response, if captured, than an escaped prisoner. One of the greatest errors atheists make is thinking God respects human rights. He has no respect for humans nor their rights, nor ought he have. There are no such thing as human rights according to God. There is no empirical evidence that we have rights. To have a right means something has to be provided when needed. It is not enough, the Bible says, to tell the hungry and homeless to go in peace. We have to provide for wants in a physically meaningful way. Rights theory tells us that if a person has a right to life, he has a claim on the resources needed for life. If we are in a lifeboat, everyone has an equal share of what is available. Or do they? Does it make sense to feed the incapacitated the same amount as those who do the rowing? It is common in subsistence cultures to prioritize the health and strength of the hunter and fighter. But when times are good, and the future seems secure, more focus can be put on the next generation. But these are not rights, at least not rights from an egocentric standpoint. The soldier is not entitled to a larger share of food because of his intersectional score. The community is investing in the defenders of the polity for their own well-being. This is the difference between merit and intersectional value. Charity sees a need and responds. This earns the person merit. Intersectional theorists claim merit based on physical attributes. Human rights and natural rights were early forms of intersectional scoring. It got us thinking because someone existed and perhaps had an identity, they had merit. The right claimed is a rationalization of a want attached to an intersectional identity. Charity is the recognition of a justified need and a willingness to respond. The fact that someone is hungry or homeless does not mean they have a right to food or shelter, not even if they belong to a racialized minority or an identifiable marginalized group. The fact they are of a particular class of persons does not mean they have a right to life. The truth of these statements is that they are political agendas or presented as part of a group's social policy. Whites are the only race that prioritizes moral issues above racial ones. Other races look at moral issues through the lens of race. Discrimination is something to fight if it impacts their race. This is why one will rarely find other races joining with whites to fight issues that impact white people or other races than their own. In fact, one rarely sees whites fighting for things that impact white people solely because of their race. When white issues are focused on, it is likely that whites and others will denigrate the concern as racism or bigotry. When it comes to issues such as female genital mutilation or the sexualization of kids, it is white people who are at the forefront, even when the issue impacts other races more than whites. But unless the issues is specifically race-related and will specifically benefit their intersectional identity, other races feel little inclination to get involved. Human rights in the abstract are primarily a white person's problem. Human rights as the rights of an intersectional identity are the problem both of whites and the race being impacted. However, linking rights to race or racial identity has backfired. We are not born entitled regardless of our race. No matter how many physical elements we can enumerate, we do not gain one more ounce of merit. Merit is an economic index that means we created value, and it is the created value that gives us value. We have a right to what we create. We have no right to anything created by anyone else. We have no right to anything created by God. This includes other people. This right is a necessary truth because no one can refute it. If you do not own what you create, if you did not create anything, you have no rights at all. The creator of nothing has no merit. If one person bakes a pie and 3 people have intersectional value, sharing it is justified based on imbued merit. In this scenario, because the majority wishes to share the pie, the majority forces the minority to share. If we do not have a right to what we create, then might makes right and the end justifies the means. There is no other options available. Either rights are a measure of earned merit or the person's intersectionality.